I reviewed Rami Barniv's excellent book, The Art of Piano Fingering, a long time ago, and it's still something I dip into very regularly now. And it outlines a concept that I found particularly illuminating, and I thought really it merited a video all of its own. And that's the hierarchy of things we should consider when we're trying to decide on our fingerings. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists or indeed anyone who loves piano to share tips and ideas of how to get the best from this great hobby. If it is your first trip here, then please do think about subscribing. Simply hit the little icon in the bottom right hand corner of your screen now and it's all done for you. Now, I think there are a few key areas of study that will make all the difference to us as aspiring pianists. And of course, one of these is how to practice something. And I think this is less often taught than perhaps it should be. However, another equally important is fingering, of course. I mean, in a way, you might think, well, fingering shouldn't be so complex. After all, we've only got 10 fingers, so there can't be so many choices. However, due to the nature of piano music, there are very often multiple choices available to us. Some of these might be very bad ideas, things that no matter how hard we practice will never sound right. Others might be good ideas that, lend themselves very well to what we're trying to play. However, there are sometimes cases where there are lots of different options and the benefits of one over the other might not be so obvious. As a way of working through a multiple number of options then, Rami's hierarchy is, I think, an excellent framework. And the hierarchy is as follows: the musical result, the health of the hands, physical convenience, and mental convenience. Let's consider first then the musical result. I mean, this is right at number one, and for good reason. Piano's all about music, isn't it? First and foremost. Therefore, whatever we're doing should be aimed at getting the best musical result we can. And in order to demonstrate this, let's think about a nice simple set of notes. In the opening bars of Mozart's Rondo in A minor, we have a simple downward run of notes, and therefore we might want to opt for a simple, nice 5-finger position type fingering. Certainly, this will feel easier for us, takes less concentration. However, if we look carefully at how Mozart has phrased this, clearly he wants to hear it in groups of 2 notes, not in one group of 5. Therefore, to get that musical result in perhaps the easiest manner, we can break that pattern by using a fingering scheme that is in fact in groups of 2. And this means the risk of it sounding like a simple downward run is much smaller, as our fingering forces the phrasing for us. This is just one tiny example, and of course, the more complex the music becomes, the more demanding the musical result can be to achieve. And therefore, the greater attention we might need to pay to our fingering. And even at a conservatory level, there's still plenty to learn. For example, I saw an excellent masterclass given by Stephen Huff, where he made a few fingering recommendations to, the person taking the class. And these weren't based on their being technically superior, but musically superior ways of fingering something. Next, let's think about the health of the hands. This, of course, is a tricky topic, isn't it? There have been many amazing pianists over the years who've injured themselves either temporarily or permanently. Of course, this is not necessarily always due to fingering. However, the crossover between fingering and technique, I think, can sometimes be difficult to spot. Certain fingerings will likely push towards use of certain techniques which might not always be appropriate. Again, giving an example, there are concert pianists, and I've seen Lang Lang do this, who will play octaves with 3, 4 and 5 on the upper note simultaneously. Arguably, this gives far greater weight to the upper note of the octave, and therefore one could argue gives a better musical result, and therefore should be preferred. However, for people with smaller hands, and indeed I think, in general, inexperienced pianists, then trying to do this is likely to lead to injury if we did it extensively, as it sort of causes the wrist to twist. Yet, being able to voice the top note of an octave with the pinky alone is more than possible. There's an excellent recording of Chopin's Etude No. 3 in E by Sokolov, where he voices the G sharp here as if it were a loud chiming bell ringing right above the remaining notes. So in short, I think that anything that forces a hand into a contorted position is probably a fingering we should avoid. As I discussed in my video on smaller hands, the more comfortable our hand feels, the better musical result we can generally achieve, and the less likely, of course, we are to injure ourselves. Let's think about physical convenience. We did in fact touch on this in the first example I gave of the Mozart rondo. Here, the clear physical convenience would be to simply use 5 consecutive fingers rather than breaking this pattern up. However, in this case, whilst it was more physically convenient, I think it would have made getting the musical result much harder. But often there'll be multiple ways of achieving the same musical result, and this is where we shouldn't be afraid of trying different fingerings. And there's another example in the same rondo by Mozart, where if I try to follow the way he seems to distribute the notes between the hands, I end up with a very inconvenient stretch. And it leaves me with an awkward feeling that would be difficult to control. Now, I'm sure with perseverance, I could get the musical result, yet is this necessarily a sensible thing? By opting to split these notes between the hands, I end up with a fingering that's much more physically convenient. Yet at the same time, and I think this is the important part, it doesn't detract from the musical result. In such cases then, I think we should definitely not make things any more difficult than they need to be. Finally, we can look at mental convenience. Now, this takes last place in terms of considerations in Rami's hierarchy. To me, this makes a lot of sense, in fact. After all, we sort of have certain physical limitations imposed on us by our hands, don't we? And of course, we've already seen that we shouldn't be doing anything that's likely to injure us, and that it makes a lot of sense to keep our fingering schemes as comfortable as possible. However, I wonder how often we let mental convenience have too great an influence on our fingering choices, when our brain, on the other hand, can more easily be trained than our fingers with a little patience. A good example of this is that, it's easier for our brain if our fingers are following the same pattern time after time. So if you look at Debussy's first arabesque, we have a passage here where it sort of lends itself to repeating the same pattern with our hand time after time. And indeed, for a long time, this is exactly how I've always played it. However, for me, this, in places, is somewhat stretchy. So perhaps it makes sense to look for more physically convenient options rather than giving my mind an easy ride. And indeed, there are a couple of places here where the basic pattern can be modified to a scheme which, yes, certainly requires more concentration, yet actually becomes better both musically and physically to play. However, this also works in 2 directions. There will be other places where we have choices where physically something might be equivalent, yet mentally it's far easier for us to do something in one way rather than the other. And we shouldn't be afraid of doing that. We shouldn't want anything to be more difficult than it absolutely needs to be. Now, this video, of course, only scratches the surface in terms of fingering. And nothing, of course, beats studying piano fingering and personal experimentation. I think it really pays dividends to think more about fingering even in much simpler music. A good choice will pay dividends, whereas often a poor choice can at best leave us with a piece that we can play, well enough, but we're never totally satisfied with the result. At worst, it leaves us with a piece that, despite lots of hard work, we struggle still to get just the notes themselves right. Again, I can't recommend too highly Rami Barniv's excellent book, which is available on Amazon in multiple languages. It's ideal for self-study or, of course, to work through with a teacher. If you're not already, please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I do thank you very much for watching and look forward to seeing you very soon.